Right. Awesome, Joe. Well, I've been known to just come right out with things, so I'll do that right here. So I wanted to let everybody know, and obviously state the obvious, that you are running for county commissioner as an independent. So
Hmm.
I think that sets the stage for this section and your stance on party politics. So let's start right there. What is your perspective on the use of labels in politics and things like that?
Yeah, yeah. This is a challenging one because I think as soon as people see I'm running as an independent, their assumption is going to be that I'm trying to cut down the middle between two extremes. Truthfully, the reason I'm running as an independent is because I don't feel good about allegiance to a particular side. I think that's hard for people to accept because we're very used to being lied to, being told things that aren't true. And so I
Mhm.
really do want to dive into this a little bit more. Um, Labels are something for me that I've always struggled with. Um, I think as soon as you label something, people stop asking. They don't want you to clarify anymore because if you say I'm a Republican, they go, "Great, you're on my side," or "You're not on my side." Or if I say I'm a Democrat, they say, "Great, you're on my side," or "You're not on my side." And we stop asking what that means. I think there's value, of course, in orienting yourself around a set of beliefs. And I have no problem talking about my values with people, but narrowing myself down and saying, I am a Democrat or I am a Republican, it's just always been a challenge for me. On a personal level, I don't like to label myself. I don't like to apply standards, which labels really do feel like standards, right? Um, they're good shorthand descriptors, but a label almost never gives credit to the complexity of an idea. And so it's always going to be a struggle for me to label myself. Me running as an independent is really for me about giving myself room to not have a label and to just talk about what I believe, to express those values as honestly and openly as I can.
Absolutely. A label never gives room for the complexity of an issue. I mean, wow. Like if you didn't just hit a nail on the head, and it's so true, right? I think that sometimes, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. We live in angry times. We live in times where these two extreme sides just can't find any middle ground. And
And
I
I'll,
think that
sorry, Jess, just to interject there. I think
oh,
the idea that Democrats and Republicans are two extremes
well,
um, is also kind of challenging, right? Because I don't think that's really true. I think that there is a huge spectrum of political perspective. Democrats and Republicans are just two general framings of like an opinion of an issue. But like if you look at the way internationally that like our Republican Party and our Democratic Party work, the Democrats are not a a paragon of liberal ideas.
fair
um,
enough.
Democrats in the global sense are kind of centrist, maybe even a little bit right leaning, but compared to the Republican Party, they certainly look a lot more liberal. Again, I'm even starting to use labels to describe the differences between these, right? And that's really what I mean when I say that like a label doesn't give credit to the complexity. Um, I don't think that it is as simple as good guys and bad guys and right and wrong in a country with 330 some million people in it. There are not going to be just like two sides. There's not going to be like a good and a bad. It's always going to be more complicated than that. Sorry, not to get on a soapbox there, but I just wanted to hit on that point of this idea of two extremes. I don't really see it that way, and I think if we do see it that way, that also gives me as like an independent less room, right? Because then it's like, okay, well, if Democrats are one end, Republicans are another, am I in the middle? No, I'm just trying my best, right?
Yeah. Hey, aren't we all? Aren't we all? So no, I remember that. And you didn't get up on the soapbox. I think that's what I was looking for when I
Okay.
asked that. So I appreciate it. But again, talking about a very complex issue, there are two sides to every coin. So,
Sure.
in your opinion, what are the pros and cons of taking a political label or a political stance? Right? Like, talk to me about that, or aligning with a political party, for lack of better words.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So um, there are some pretty obvious pros to aligning yourself with a particular group, right? I think the most obvious one for me is money, resources.
Mhm.
The Republican Party and the Democratic Party in the United States have entrenched themselves, right? And they work kind of like companies do. They have funding sources, and they think about how to distribute those resources best, and they think about national objectives and state objectives and local objectives. And for everybody who's in the room on a Monday night for a monthly meeting, right? They're there because they feel at least that the organization is worth connecting to. But the cons to that as a politician, right? Not as a member of the community, but as a politician, are really sharp. One of the most obvious ones for me is oversight into beliefs. I have seen on the national stage people do and say things that feel contradictory to what they've said in private. And
Mhm.
I've heard justification for that being, well, she couldn't say that and still be supported by the National Democratic Party. I don't want that kind of influence because to me, while I think it's important to take perspective from those organizations, I think it's really important to account for their view of things. That level of control that they're allowed to exercise means that I might not be able to serve my community as well as I want to. It
Mhm.
means that I might not be able to give people what they're asking for, what they need. It means I might not be able to offer them solutions to their problems if those don't align with a perspective that is just not focused on this community, right? The other disadvantage, which I've already talked about, is labeling. As
Mhm.
soon as I put on a ballot that I'm an R or a D or a G, right? There's lots of options. As soon as I attach a label to myself, people stop asking me what it means. And they
Mhm.
assume, oh, you're a Democrat. You're like
Mhm.
me. Even if that's not true. I've talked with people involved in party politics at the local level who have really tried to expose the individual perspective of people within their parties. And when they do, they go find a lot of conflict. There's a lot of disagreement at the individual level in what being a Democrat means and what being a Republican means, right?
Mhm.
But that advantage of being able to connect with that community is, I think, what holds those folks together. And I think that's really awesome. I think organizing is really important. I just don't want that influence myself if I'm
Mhm.
going to be making decisions on behalf of a community. This work is too important, the community is too important to have that kind of influence pushing me towards one thing, towards one particular way of thinking about something. I really do want to try to account for as broad of a perspective as I can, and as soon as I attach a label to myself, it closes me off from
Yeah.
from some of that perspective, from some of that agency, right?
Absolutely, and I think those cons in my book do outweigh some of those pros. But going back to it, right? I would agree. I think the biggest pro of aligning one way or the other is and are the resources. So not to veer too much off of the message here, but have you thought about how that impacts your ability to run and like how you're gonna maybe get boots on the ground grassroots type of organizations together with the community to get you to power as an independent
um, I
it's
I take a little issue with that phrasing if you don't mind to
yeah,
get me
but
to power, right? I think like
yeah,
look if sorry, not to be too critical of the wording there, but
it
just
can
to put
be
a finer point on it, this is not about being in charge,
right.
right? I think that if my goal in running for office is just to be in charge, I'm running for office for the wrong reasons.
Yep.
It has to be thinking about what the community needs and recognizing that if I'm in that position, I can do that better.